What's up, everybody? Welcome to Cinemaholic Productions channel. My name is Spencer Henderson, and I am a cinemaholic.
I'm Ryan Gordon, and I as well am a cinemaholic.
We have a big show for you guys today. First, we're going to be talking about Max Steel, the new superhero film. Next, we're going to be talking about 13th, which is a new documentary that is actually available on Netflix. So most people have access to Netflix. So perhaps we will suggest it to you. We'll see. And third, we're going to be talking about the new Ben Affleck thriller, The Accountant, starring Ben Affleck, I should note, because he is also a well-known director. So I think we're going to start out with Ryan telling us a little bit about Max Steel.
Yes.
So go ahead, Ryan.
Max Steel, the new superhero franchise, I would say. Lots of potential here. The synopsis reads, a 16-year-old, Max McGrath, has just moved to a new town and is desperately trying to fit in when he discovers his body can generate the universe's most powerful energy. I'm just going to stop right there. It goes on for a little bit longer, but that's the movie. Spoiler alert. I mean, that is literally the whole movie. It went wide this week. Apparently it had a lot of drama. I think they had a lot of production drama. It was very low key. They released the trailer like a month ago outside of the US, and then it took them like 2 more weeks until we got a trailer here, but nobody watched it. I don't know if there's a real fan base for this movie. It was originally a TV show in the 90s, or maybe it was just like an action figure or something. I don't know anything about this movie. I went and I saw it. I don't care about this movie. It was awful. It felt like a 90-minute failed pilot episode of something that they were hoping could just explode into this franchise and they could make a lot of money. But it took 70 minutes to set up the premise. And then by the time it actually got to something, nobody cared. I mean, nobody cared from the beginning, but you get into the last 20 minutes of the film and it immediately wraps itself up in a very anticlimactic battle that you may not even be able to call as a battle. I'd checked out at that point. The only thing this film has going for it is how bad it is. And what got me through the whole movie was sitting there and just like, what are they going to do next? Like, can this movie get any worse? And yes, it does. It just gets worse and worse and worse. Spencer, I made you go and see this. What did you think?
Yeah, so that's one thing I was going to start off by saying is like I was going to straight up have an intervention with you because we're 3 weeks into this and you suggest we go see Max Steel. But I will say, I don't know, this is right there with Gods of Egypt for my least favorite movie so far this year. Also, I guess I really dislike Suicide Squad. But this is far worse than Suicide Squad. Let me get a little bit into my thoughts about this movie. So I want to start off by saying the problems of this movie begin with the first frame of the movie. It starts off very quick, and as soon as it started, I was like, oh no, what did he do? He got us into something so bad. I never text in movies, but I thought of pulling out my phone and texting, damn you, Ryan, because this movie was so bad at the beginning. And it did somehow manage to get worse. And I do agree there's that kind of morbid curiosity. But let me go over a few things, first of all. So the love story in this movie might be the worst love story ever put to film. Like worse than Twilight. I know lots of people dislike the love story in Twilight. I haven't watched the entire Twilight franchise, so I feel like I can't really have a say there. But I can't imagine Twilight being worse than this with like 4 or 5 movies, whatever it had to set up the love story. Because this love story, there is a conversation in this film about naming a bike that is the most ridiculously just awful like scene I've ever seen in like, and the director tried to direct it where it's like the moment where Max realizes he falls in love with this girl, and it is just the worst dialogue. It's worse than the sand part in Attack of the Clones for Star Wars. It is so bad. And there's a montage sequence in this movie where Max Steel is training, and he's like doing these flips, and the robot is doing the flips with him. And that was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen. It was so awful. There is
straight out of Spider-Man, but just over the top. Like Spider-Man pulled it off, and this took that good premise of I'm going to learn, I'm going to discover my powers, and then it just.
Well, here's my biggest issue with what you said, Ryan, is what are his powers? Explain to me. What can he do? What are his powers? What can he do?
I have no idea. I mean, he can do anything, I guess. I mean, he's got what is he? He's a atom bomb or something? I mean, he's going to explode or something.
Yeah, he's going to explode. That's all there is to him. He can like move blue energy with his hands. That's not a superpower. They don't tell you any skills he can do with that. He like shuts off a guy's phone at one scene, which makes no sense because then he turns to the guy and he says, "I'm sorry." And it's like, why would you do that? Why would you like blow your cover? But and then Steele, the voice actor, who I figured out, what's the actor's name? What'd you say his name was? That's okay. It's Nelson Bigetti from
Josh
Silicon
Brenner.
Valley. Josh Brenner. If anybody watched Silicon Valley, he's big head. And he's the voice of Steel, and that voice performance, it sounded like some nerdy teenager that they just pulled off the road and were like, "Hey, buddy, we'll give you $10 if you just read these lines off a piece of paper." And he's like, "Oh, okay." Then he went into this like closet and sketchily read these films into a MacBook Pro that had no microphone or anything. And then they just put it into the movie and said, "Okay, we'll just go with that." And there's one scene in this movie at the end where, I kid you not, there's a flashback sequence with Max Steel's parents where the mother says, "What will he be?" And then the father says, "He'll be whatever he needs to be," followed by them both looking directly at the camera. And at that point, I just bursted out laughing. It was the funniest thing I've seen maybe in the movies this year.
Was there anybody in the theater with you?
Dude, there was actually several people in this theater. It's like people in Colorado have nothing better to do on a Saturday night. Granted, I don't either, but everybody was there watching Max Steel for some reason. It was in like the smallest theater in the building, and for some reason it was super crowded. The last thing I want to touch upon about this movie is, what is it with Hollywood deciding that we need to degrade all of the great actors of old from the 70s this year? We have Dirty Grandpa that came out with Robert De Niro and spat all over Travis Bickle, the Raging Bull, all of these great characters. They spat on his face with the performance in Dirty Grandpa. And here we have Andy Garcia with like the worst performance since Al Pacino in Jack and Jill, which is another great actor that Hollywood feels the need just to destroy their career. Good job, Hollywood. There's like a suit that Andy Garcia wears at the end of this movie. All I got to say is I hope he got paid a lot, because he looks so ridiculous in that suit. Did you not like laugh when you saw him?
I started thinking of like everything that this movie tried was from a different superhero franchise. The second he walked out, I thought, "Oh, this is just a ripoff of Ant-Man." What am I watching? It is the most ridiculous thing I've seen all year. And at the beginning of the year, the first movie I watched was Norm of the North. So that's saying something, that this is that bad.
Yeah, this is awful stuff, guys. Don't support this. I hope this movie fails, and I know that's really bad to say, but like this really, Hollywood, I feel like I'm just tired, guys. You guys are taking it out of me. You're draining the life from me. I'm like slouching a little bit right now because this movie has just exhausted me.
Okay, well then, let's give it a score. I gave it a 0.25. For just because I gave it that 0.25 because it was so ridiculous, it kept me not, I don't even want to say engaged because I was checking my phone. I was literally the only one in the auditorium. It was as well in the smallest auditorium the theater had, and I didn't care. But I kept watching because I was anxious to see if it could get any worse. So I give it a 0.25.
Nice, nice. Well, I say that this movie deserves no rating because this is so bad. This is just oh, it just wore me out. I'm tired. I'm gonna disregard that this thing ever happened. After this, I'm wiping my hands of this, guys. This is never coming back to my thoughts again.
Until
Starting
we do
now.
the worst movies of the year recap, and then it'll be back.
Well, you just ruined my day, Ryan. Okay, well, that being said, let's get into a much, much better movie. Spoiler alert. We're going to talk about Ava DuVernay, who directed Selma. Ryan, did you see Selma?
I did. I loved Selma. It was one of my favorites of that year, and I feel like David Oyelowo was totally snubbed with at least a nomination for an Oscar because his performance was astonishing and the direction of that whole movie was great.
I definitely agree with everything you just said. And after I saw that movie, I tend to, when I see a film with a director that I notice might have some potential, I say, hey, maybe I'll continue to tune in on these movies. And when I heard of their 13th, sorry, I keep calling it the 13th, but it's just called 13th. I said, this is a movie that I was going to seek out. So according to IMDb, the plot summary of this documentary is an in-depth look at the prison system in the United States and how it reveals the nation's history of racial inequality. Ryan, what did you think of 13th?
So I have pretty strong emotions towards this. I want to preface all my thoughts by saying I'm not a big documentary fan, but I did take a doc class last semester in college, and I've gained a great appreciation for well-made documentaries. This film is I wrote it down because I didn't want to screw up what I was going to say. I wrote down a well-made, informative, and visually appealing documentary that should but won't be recognized by the Academy. It does very well at explaining everything it needs to say. I feel like it does a good job at appealing to both sides of the matter. It prevents a very well-rounded view of the subject material that it's trying to cover. The direction is astonishing. Again, just like Selma, it handles the information and the visuals in a perfect way that it will have a lot of floating heads. But when I say floating head, it's just like an interview style, but it manages to keep everything visually entertaining through all of the floating heads. Plus, you get some footage pulled off of the internet and probably some that they just went and gathered and did some recreation, as well as there's chunks where they split up and they start doing like a music video, kind of a lyric video kind of thing, which really stood out to me and I really enjoyed. Overall, I walked away watching this really enjoying it. Like I said, it is very informative. It's not necessarily storytelling. It's more information based. It's not linear. Well, I guess it is linear because it does start back with slaves and it progresses forward to where we are now. But it's not necessarily like, oh, we're going to follow this character and we're going to discover their journey. It is very information based.
Yeah, I totally agree 100% with everything you just said. This is an incredible documentary. I really thought that, yeah, it was very provocative. It said a lot of important things that I think need to be acknowledged about the justice system in the United States of America. And this movie opens with a very shocking statistic. I'll quickly say that statistic. the United States makes up 5% of the world's population. However, we make up 25% of the prison population of the world. That is far more than any other country in the world. And that being said, the movie follows on that premise. And I think that this movie brings up lots of interesting things. And I think it's particularly from Ava DuVernay's direction. As you kind of said, lots of times the word criminal flashes on the screen throughout this movie. It says it basically, it flashes whenever somebody says criminal. And by the end of the movie, you understand that what they're doing with that is they're trying to say that maybe this is becoming like a new kind of racial slur and profile that we are putting on people just because we've decided to basically enslave people in different ways. Because yeah, corporations are holding the prison system up and they have to meet a quota. And that's really kind of crazy. And another thing that I thought was really interesting is how it kind of went after both kind of presidential candidates in this very election this year. This movie had a lot to say about Bill Clinton and a lot to say about Donald Trump as well, which I thought is something that needed to be addressed. And after this movie, I have to say that I will continue to watch anything by Ava DuVernay. I think she's the true star of this documentary. I think that her direction is superb. She showed a ton of promise in Selma. I agree with what you said about that movie as well, that it was completely and totally snubbed. She was snubbed an Oscar nomination as well. And I hope that she continues to find good projects and bring projects that have important things to say, especially because I think this movie raised lots of interesting topics and subjects. So what's your score on 13th, Ryan?
So before I get into my score, I just want to say one or two more things. I feel like you said this was a very well-timed movie, that it does bring up both presidential candidates running right now, and it does highlight some things that they've said in the past, as well as everything that's going on right now with Black Lives Matter. Just is very well-timed. This is something that needed to come forth right now. Like you said, Ava DuVernay, I'm going to follow her career because she, for those who don't know, she is a Black female director, which is very much the minority in the industry, and she does very well handling that kind of material with Selma and with this. And I don't quote me on any of this, but I did read a report a couple months ago about she's doing A Wrinkle in Time, a remake for Disney. And I think she's like the first or the second female director to ever handle and helm a movie over $100 million in the budget. So she is making huge strides for herself as well as for women and Blacks in the industry. So I'm very excited to see where her career goes. With this movie, I will give it an 8 out of 10, a very strong movie. That's basically all I can say about it. I loved the movie. I've talked about the strengths. Really, the only weakness for me was that it just wasn't, it was very informative, and that wasn't necessarily something that I was looking for, though that's exactly what it was meant to be. So I'd give it an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. The only gripe I have about this movie is I don't think it has too much replay value. It's kind of just something that gives you the information, and once it's over, you've seen it, the information now, and it's kind of just what you decide to do with that with that information, who you decide to sway to see this. So yeah, I really like this movie. I'd give this a 9 out of 10. I thought it was very informative, and I think that people should definitely check this one out.
Awesome. So let's get into The Accountant really fast and then end this week's episode. I have a feeling this is probably the one that people are the most interested about out of the three that we're talking about today. The Accountant, like you said, starring Ben Affleck. It's not a Ben Affleck made movie. He didn't direct it. It was directed by Gavin O'Connor, who has brought forth movies like, I'm see, last year he did, or maybe it was even this year, Jane Got a Gun, and then he did Warrior and Miracle. Those are some of the bigger ones. I really enjoyed Warrior. I really enjoyed Miracle. I actually liked Jane Got a Gun, and I was looking forward to this movie. I liked it. I don't think it was as good as it could have been. And I feel like, especially with critics right now, this has kind of been broken into two. There's either people who like it or people who don't like it. So I'm interested to see where you fall on that.
Yeah, no, I wasn't a huge fan of this movie, and it bothered me because there was enough things in this movie that made me kind of want to like it, like because it was a very well cast movie. First of all, I didn't know much about the cast before I saw this. I knew that Ben Affleck was in it, and I knew that Gavin O'Connor directed because I looked just at that right before I went into the movie. But this movie, one of the things that bothered me the most is this movie has a laughably kind of bad and misconceived portrayal of autism. His character starts out pretty severely autistic in the opening scene of the film as a child. He's like, and the way they kind of set it up, kind of, I felt like was very kind of heavy-handed. The way they introduce his character, how smart he is and how much of a brilliant mind he is. And he couldn't even communicate at that point. And then flash forward years down the road, we see him and he's like this person who has trouble communicating with people, but he can very easily talk to people and understand kind of their emotions in the situation. I just felt like he couldn't understand his own emotions. And so I felt like it may be a story about a hitman who, or not a hitman, an accountant, but who basically has these crazy skills, but it kind of goes a little hitman at certain points. Kind of could be an interesting concept if he has kind of these behavioral disabilities, if it's kind of portrayed well. And I just feel like if you kind of mess up the thing you're trying to do, I don't know, it didn't really work for me. I will say I really like J.K. Simmons in this movie. I thought he did a pretty dang good job. And there was a kind of like a twist towards the end that there was something that set it up early in the movie that I kind of said, well, when's this going to be introduced into the story, or this going to happen? And it does eventually get introduced. So I kind of figured that would happen at some point. I didn't know when it was going to happen. I didn't expect it at that part. But yeah, overall, I really didn't enjoy this movie. It was kind of meh. It wasn't something I hated watching, but it was something I just didn't really enjoy and kind of forgot about.
Right. I think let down is probably the best way I can describe my thoughts, is because you go into it, you've got Batman versus Commissioner Gordon versus the Punisher. Like, you've got all of these people in this movie, and it has potential. The first trailer I loved. I thought it did a fantastic job at getting me excited for this movie. That's being said, the next two trailers that came out weren't bad. They were still good and got me excited, but that first trailer was awesome. I got into it and I was enjoying myself, and I thought it had a good pacing, but I don't think the non-linear style is for Gavin O'Connor, because you do flip back and forth with flashbacks and such, and I feel like that was probably what was the overall downfall. I felt like I was getting hit in the head a few times, and I mean, I don't want to spoil anything, but
no, if you say spoilers, it's all free
Okay.
game. We can say spoilers because I kind of want to get a little bit into spoilers.
Okay. So spoilers going from here on out. The flashbacks are a bunch of plantings for what's going to come at the end, and by the second time they did the flashbacks, I figured, they're not going to be showing me these two figures in his past, his brother and his dad, unless someone he's involved with right now is going to turn out to be those guys. And you figure out, like, halfway through, his dad dies. And so obviously his brother is going to come into play at the end somehow. And I didn't appreciate that because I knew it was coming. That being said, I talked to someone on Saturday about it, and they totally didn't see it coming, and they loved the movie. So maybe that's just kind of the thing that's splitting people, is if you figure it out, the rest of the movie just kind of feels meh. Whereas the person that I spoke to on Saturday loved it because he didn't see it coming. And then when you discover his brother at the end, he's like, whoa, where did that come from? The only other spoiler that I want to get into really is the big reveal at the end. And it's kind of just a throwaway reveal with who the voice is. I didn't like that at all. It felt out of place and didn't really make sense to me. You know, I get that it was someone that he was supposed to trust, but you know, I felt like it did have good flavors of like John Wick when it went into the action aspect. And I wish there would have been more action in this movie, because you don't get into that until 3/4 of the way through the movie. I'm mixed about it, though. I did, you know, I'm bashing on it a bit. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the ride that it took me on, and I walked away with a few of those concerns, but overall it was a fun experience.
Well, one of the things I was kind of thinking of when I watched this is, isn't it kind of funny how it's kind of like the Ben Affleck kind of wanted to be like the Jason Bourne kind of guy in this
Right.
movie, I kind of felt like, and that was super, super funny to me. And the action, yeah, it was good when it happened. It just hardly ever happened, like you said.
Right. So overall, I'd give it a 6.75, which I've been up in the air about. I will put it up as high as a 6.75 because it was a fun experience. And if you don't catch on, if you are sitting through the movie and you're oblivious, not saying that that's a bad thing, if the movie takes you over in a way that you don't see anything coming, I feel like you'll really enjoy this movie. I wish there was some more action, and the pacing was good, but the flashbacks didn't work for me. So overall, a 6.75 for me.
Yeah, I'd probably go a little bit lower. I'd say this one's about 4.5. It's about halfway there. And like, if you have interest in seeing, I'd say it'd be worth like red boxing. I just don't know if it's worth seeking out in the theater. Basically is why I'm going so low. It's not a horrible movie. It's just not something that I really enjoyed or would probably ever plan on rewatching.
Awesome. So that's our thoughts today, guys. Those were the wide releases from this week, plus 13th, which actually came out on Netflix last week. Out of the three, don't go see Max Steel. Check out 13th, and if you have a hookup to go see The Accountant in the theater, go see it. But you don't have to catch it immediately. It's a good, enjoyable time if you've got some spare time on your hands. So I'm Ryan Gordon. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram right there at Rye_Gordon. I've been trying to tweet a lot more. I think it's working. So.
Yep. You can follow me on Twitter at SpinnyHind. My name is Spencer Henderson, and I am a Cinemaholic. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share this with your friends if you enjoyed it. And if anybody has any interest in these movies and you think they deserve two very, very valid opinions. Thanks, guys, for watching. Have a great night.